thought we were dancing. The members that we have present and accounted for are Mr. Roberts, Mr. Shoemaker, Mr. Alzamora, Mrs. Burnett, Mr. Schreiber, Mr. Hooper, and myself, Mr. Sanawaso. We have a quorum. We can do business. There will also be two of our members, our regular members, present but virtual, Sonia Rothstein and Julia Latham. And I see them up on the screen. Hello to you too. Can you hear everybody?
Yes, thank you.
Sonia?
Yes,
Thank you. First order of business is the approval of the minutes of the October 1st, 2020 regular meeting. They were included in your packets, and I trust you all went and picked them up and read it. And I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The October 1st meeting minutes are approved. The next item is a public hearing that has been continued from the October meeting. So I would need a motion to recess our regular meeting and a second to go into public hearing number 1. Do I have a motion? Motion by Joel Schreiber. Second?
Second.
Second by Cindy. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? We're now in public hearing number 1. I would repeat the question that I asked previously with respect to conflict of interest. If any board members have any conflicts associated with this application, let's hear about it now. I know there was one question, but I believe, Jeremy, that had been clarified, and there was no objection to your sitting on the board to hear the case.
Of course, and if that's changed, just feel free to let me know.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Not a lot of people here, but has anyone been listed on a sign-up sheet? Thank you, Kelly. The two names on the sign-up sheet are Tim Carpenter and Marcel Gano, the applicant and his representative. Anyone else would like to speak? We'll catch you after we finish at the end of the testimony. Alex, would you introduce the public hearing item, please?
I'll be glad to, and this will be a little bit of a refresher if we remember from the continued October public hearing item. This is a major subdivision review for a 42-lot single-family subdivision located in the village's ETJ. It's located just off of and south of Blake Boulevard. Consists currently of parcel ID number 0004627 and a portion of parcel ID number 00046241. The applicant and the property owner for this proposal is the Cottages at Legacy Lakes LLC. The current zoning and land use of both of these parcels are zoned, the larger parcel is R5 for high-density residential. Currently, it has this one single-family residential lot containing around 13 acres. The other lot is about 1.3 acres in size and is zoned NC for Neighborhood Commercial District. There is no proposed zone change for either of these two lots. The use is for, again, a 42-lot subdivision with 38 single-family residential lots and the related infrastructure. As previously stated in the October public hearing, this hearing was duly posted, adjacent owners have been notified, and the public hearing was published for the October 1st meeting date. Again, this hearing is scheduled as such and required by this notice by our ordinance, even though this is not a legislative hearing such as it would be related for a zoning text or map amendment. So the reason why we're here and why the Planning and Zoning Board is asked to review such a proposal is the Pinehurst Development Ordinance does state that any subdivision creating more than 3 lots or in which involves a dedication or improvement of any new streets is therefore a major subdivision, and first initially requires review of applications and material by the village planner as well as the technical review committee. After the TRC or technical review committee reviews and issues comments and the applicant addresses such comments, the proposal is then reviewed by this board in a public hearing to formulate a recommendation to village council. Once that is concluded, village council will hold a public hearing and reviews the project and can then approve, conditionally approve, or reject the proposed preliminary plat. Included with this subdivision application are the application for a major subdivision, revised preliminary plat, trip generation, biological assessment for red cockaded woodpecker impacts, and included, that was not, and with this packet that was not from last month, is a checklist of requirements, as there was quite a bit of discussion over complete versus incomplete material. Again, not to be redundant, but this request would create a 42-lot subdivision within the village's extraterritorial jurisdiction, or again referenced ETJ. It would include 38 residential lots. The remaining lots would be undeveloped common areas and a pump station for sanitary sewer. The parent tracts of this proposed subdivision, again, the larger tract is Moore County Parcel ID number 000-46287, and then a approximate 1.3 acre portion of parcel ID 000-46241, and located just off of Blake Boulevard, south of that, which is a village-owned right-of-way, and north of Olivia Lane. The site is currently vacant and highly vegetated. These proposed lots range in size from 6,600 square feet to 13,479 square feet in size. The R5 zoning district allows for a minimum of 5,000 square foot lots. There is no option currently in our PDO to develop a residential open space subdivision in the R5 zoning district, and the property is not located within a watershed protection district, so there are no further limits on density or impervious coverage that are not already listed in the R5 zoning district. All of these lots will have to and do currently meet the dimensional requirements of the R5 zoning district. And again, the minimum lot size and the typical lot size as shown with this preliminary plat and this layout is 6,600 square feet, which allows for approximately 2,800 square feet of buildable area. Other lots shown will be, again, common area, will have areas for stormwater management, sanitary sewer lift station, and other undeveloped common areas. Included here is you'll see a table of the dimensional requirements of the R5 district. We talked about the minimum lot size. The minimum building height is 35 feet. Lot coverage of impervious surface is 45%. Setbacks are as follows for the principal building: the front 20 feet, side 10 feet, side street 15, rear 20, accessory building setbacks side 5, side street 15, and rear setback of 10. So the surrounding areas do contain a mix of land uses as zoning. Table on the left and the zoning map there on the right can help you navigate. To the north is Senior Living or Rehabilitation Center and is zoned NC. This area just here to the north of, or just bordering south of Blake Boulevard here and to the north of the larger area is all NC and is the Pinehurst South area. To the south is the single-family residential area of CCNC, which is zoned R210 and is currently vacant. To the east are other lots at the rear of CCNC. They are also zoned R210 and contain single-family residence and vacant. As you can see, the structure footprints here on the zoning map on your right. To the west is vacant commercial and office area zoned NC and OP for office and professional. The comprehensive plan, land use designation, so the 2019 comprehensive plan does call this area, it is included in the focus area 2, the Highway 5 commercial area, and it calls for mixed-use stacked residential. Here you can see an excerpt from the 2019 comprehensive plan, and we're talking about this area generally here in the pink, which again, the scenario plan that it called for was for mixed-use center and stacked residential, not necessarily standalone single family. The comprehensive plan, as we know, also called for the village to develop a small area plan for this area with additional public input to ensure that high-quality development, as well as to consider the need for mixed uses with potentially a primary focus on office, medical, life science, and research facilities, something that may could create the innovation hub that we've heard discussed during the adoption of the 2019 comprehensive plan. So this proposed subdivision is not consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, it is compliant with the existing zoning that is in place at this time. Here is a revised preliminary plat. It's a little bit different than what was shown and provided in the agenda packet from last month's meeting. Namely, there is an extra single-family lot here just to the south abutting Olivia Lane. There is a turnaround and future right-of-way reserved here just north of that lot. There is a 30-foot pedestrian access easement and storm utility easement that is provided between lots 13 and 14. So those are really the minor additions that were, or revisions that were included from the previous meeting in October 1st. Apologize for the orientation on this, but there's no way to really fit it on a slide, but it is included in your packet, and that is the sheet L2, which is the utility layout, which also has other lot dimensions on there. It's a little bit easier to determine just the size of the lots. Here's a vicinity map with the project overlay. This was the previous proposal that didn't include that extra single-family lot and the future right-of-way reservation here to the south at Olivia Lane. However, I think it still gives a very good visual to what the project would look like overlaid within the immediate area. So the site features of this proposal is talking really mainly the infrastructure that is associated with this subdivision. All internal streets are now provided with a 60-foot right-of-way, 24 feet street width, and a 49-foot cul-de-sac radius. The applicant is currently proposing to use valley gutter in lieu of full concrete curb and gutter, and this is a requirement in Engineering Standards Specifications Manual, and this waiver would have to be granted by Village Council. Access to the subdivision is from a connection to Blake Boulevard, which is a village-owned and maintained right-of-way. Future 60-foot right-of-way, as I mentioned earlier, was shown to be preserved adjacent to the neighboring properties that border Arnett Street, which is a North Carolina DOT-owned and maintained road. And this came about a comment of planning staff as it could provide for future extension of Arnett Street and could provide a little bit more reasonable means of ingress and egress for the surrounding properties. Additionally, a turnaround capable for large vehicles such as fire apparatus and solid waste service trucks is also provided in the area, so they could help get turnaround if they needed. And this is there between lots 14 and the newly created lot of number 41. Currently, this proposal also does include a 20-foot wide gated emergency vehicle access from Olivia Lane. Currently, the village is afforded a lease agreement with Aberdeen Carolina Western Railroad Company to utilize a crossing at Olivia Lane and Highway 5 for the sole purpose to serve emergency services to the lots at the rear of CCNC. The streets with this proposal are intended to be public and can only be accepted as such by Village Council, and that would be after construction drawings would be approved, the construction take place and inspected, ensured to meet our standards, and then a warranty put in place. Sidewalks are required with all major subdivisions and are actually provided with this proposal on both sides of all streets as shown on the plans. Again, as I previously mentioned, a 30-foot wide pedestrian easement and storm drainage easement is now provided between lots 3 and 4, and this could allow for future potential pedestrian access to the adjacent commercial zone property as it gets developed in the future. Also, the applicant will address this, but it's also intended to handle pre and post stormwater runoff a little bit better and manage it to their stormwater areas that are proposed on the plan. Public water and sewer are proposed to be provided and serve all these lots, and will be done so by Moore County Public Utilities, with the pump station lot to be turned over to them for their future ownership and maintenance. The current plan does indicate a stormwater control measure on site, including 2 detention areas, and this system will also be required to be designed, constructed, and inspected in accordance with the village's engineering standards and specifications manual. The applicant has indicated that a homeowners association will be formed and will be responsible for the maintenance of the required improvements and ownership of the common area and undeveloped lots. The applicant intends to petition for annexation into the village's corporate limits, and if done so and accepted by the village, we could then provide solid waste and police services, as well as take over the ownership and maintenance of the improvements within the right-of-way, again, as long as the work is constructed and inspected to be in compliance with our engineering standards. So landscaping, due to the residential single-family development proposed with this and allowed by the current zoning, and the adjacent residential property to the east, there is no landscaping necessarily required other than street trees. If the adjacent, or when the adjacent commercial properties were to be developed, they would be required to install a 30-foot wide planted buffer. The street trees will be required at a rate of 1 large hardwood or pine per 40 linear feet of roadway, minus drives, access aisles, et cetera. And these will need to be, they're conceptually depicted on the preliminary plat that's included with your packet. However, a landscape plan will, showing compliance with our standards, will need to be submitted, reviewed, and approved as part of the construction drawing approval phase. Environmental impacts within the 2 areas here with this proposal: there is no floodplain, no wetlands, or is not, again, located within a public water supply watershed. A portion of the subdivision area does lie within an active, or within a half mile of an active RCW petition. Previously, last year, a biological assessment was provided by Dr. Carter and Associates, local biologist in the area, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has issued a letter of concurrence with that, stating that there would be no negative impacts on the RCW habitat with this proposal as shown. So back to the staff technical review. So the technical review committee, which does consist of planning staff, engineering, Moore County Public Works staff, fire, have reviewed this application and associated material through 4 reviews and have issued comments on the proposal. The applicant has submitted updated and revised material based on the comments that we had provided. There are still a few technical items that would need to be addressed and can be done so at the time of submittal and prior to the approval of construction drawings. And these items include that Moore County Public Works will need to perform a full hydraulic model in the water system based on the needed fire flow with this proposal to make sure what the water demand is and that it can be met. There's a question on the site distance, at the safe site distance at the proposed intersection with Blake Boulevard. And of course, the status of Olivia Lane, really specifically its status as of right-of-way, ownership, and the status of the village's current lease agreement with Aberdeen Carolina Western Railroad, and really how that could impact a second form of access for fire apparatus as required by Appendix D of the Fire Code. So with that, staff and TRC does have a recommendation that based on the revisions that have been submitted with this plat, that we recommend, the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of the preliminary plat to Village Council with the following conditions: that all the dwelling units be equipped with a fire sprinkler suppression system as approved by the Village of Pinehurst Fire Marshal, unless the village's current lease agreement with the Aberdeen Carolina Western Railroad Company is renegotiated to permit emergency secondary access to the subdivision. Prior to approval of construction drawings, the applicant is to provide information acceptable to the village that an emergency access drive can be connected to Olivia Lane. Second, a site distance analysis be performed and signed by a qualified licensed North Carolina professional engineer with transportation engineering experience for the proposed intersection with Blake Boulevard to confirm compliance with the AASHTO and North Carolina DOT requirements noted in the village's engineering standards specifications manual as part of and prior to approval of the construction drawing submittal for this project. These conditions have been shared with the applicant and his team, and I'll let them speak to that more lately, but they have intended to be amenable to these conditions, and I believe there is a revised plat that would speak to that. So action by this board, after conclusion of a public hearing and reviewing the material along with the staff recommendations and the requirements in the development ordinance, the board should take one of the following actions. You can ask the applicant to revise the preliminary plat before being submitted to village council. You can go ahead and recommend action on the plat to village council, or as previously done with last month's meeting, you may continue the public hearing to provide the applicant opportunity to give or address more comments that may be arise during the public hearing. And also, it's a very important note is with this public hearing, as Chair Sinawaso noticed at the beginning of the meeting, we have 2 folks that are attending remotely. So this is a remote meeting as defined by North Carolina General Statute. So we must allow for a minimum of a 24-hour public comment period following the public hearing before you make your official action. So I would recommend, once ready to close the public hearing and during the board's deliberation, you guys consider scheduling and what times and dates work for the board. There is a finite availability of meeting space for staff to be able to pull all this together. As you see, there's 6 staff members here right now making all this work. So right now, November 13th is a available date where we can have meeting space where we are now to secure that. However, the other opportunity is to delay and allow for that public comment period of time and do action at the regular scheduled December meeting. And for anyone who is in person or watching the meeting via the village's live stream, in order to provide public comments to this board, you can do so by emailing the clerk to the board at kbrown@vopnc.org. So with that, that will conclude staff's initial presentation, and I will turn the floor back over to you, Chair.
Before we get into the applicant's presentation and further discussion associated with that, just a few items I'd like to get clarified from the report, Alex. Drawings still show sidewalks on both sides of the streets, on Street A, B, and C. Is that the intent?
Correct.
And also, the pavement widths vary. From the original drawing, Street A was to be 28 feet wide, Streets B and C 24 feet wide. Is that still the intent?
My understanding was they were all to be 28 feet wide now. If I'm incorrect in that statement, would definitely let the applicant's team speak to that.
What is the date of the revised letter from Carter Associates?
We did not get a revised letter from Carter and Associates. We did get a revised letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it's dated October 22nd of this year.
Is October 22nd, 2020 the right date?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. If no one else has any questions of Alex's report, I guess it's the applicant's time to make a presentation.
I have one question, please.
Yes.
On the United States Department of Interior, on their last paragraph, is that being addressed? I'm just not sure. I want to make sure that is addressed. That's on October the 22nd, 2020, United States Department of Interior.
Yeah.
And it talks about the recovery of the species and making sure that those trees stay as much as possible, et cetera. Is that being addressed at all? Or are we just going with the trees however?
It seems to me that the feds are satisfied that they've addressed whatever they need to address, and all there is to it.
Yeah, so I apologize, I don't have the letter right in front of me at this time, but usually what it states in my recollection of the letter is it states that they do recommend that the proposal and the development mitigate any removal of the mature trees that are on the site. That is definitely not a requirement. It's not like there is a designated tree that cannot be removed, but it's recommended language, and it's certainly something that can be discussed in a public hearing with the applicant.
In this second
Okay.
sentence of the last paragraph of the letter, I quote, "Therefore, based on the information provided,
Yep, that's yours.
you have satisfied Fish and Wildlife Service guidelines related to the red cockaded woodpecker responsibilities under the Endangered Species Act."
Right, but I guess I was reading the first part of the paragraph. Recovery efforts for this species are underway and may result in groups becoming reestablished in areas currently unoccupied by the species. And then it goes on to talk about that. That's why I'm a little concerned that we make sure we address the trees.
And Ms. Rothstein, too,
Yep.
that's why, too, you'll see that, and I know because I've had these conversations with Ms. Miller with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is that these letters are typically good for a year, as of course, the desire and hope is that the habitats do grow, that they're able
Right.
to expand and move and forage throughout the area, and hopefully, there's less taking and more of that happening. So if within a year, if development doesn't move forward, then we can require another assessment and another letter to make sure that that hasn't happened and there wouldn't be any impacts after that. And there is also sort of a caveat within these letters too, that they may revisit or may reassess the proposal if new evidence comes to light.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to the board? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to be here again. My name is Tim Carpenter with LKC Engineering, representing the applicant, Cottages at Legacy Lakes, and Marcel Gannett. We also have Dave Neal in attendance, applicant's attorney, for any other questions that may come up. Is it all right if I do this?
that's okay with me if you take them down, because it's a lot easier to
Keep falling
understand what
down
we're
anyway.
saying.
So, okay, thank you. So this is a project we've worked on, as you all know, for some time. We've had previous iterations of the project that captured some of the neighborhood commercial properties. We've worked with an ad hoc committee of the planning board. We pared the project back to what you now see, which is about a 14.4 acre single-family tract on a by right zoning of R5, and with the addition of the 1.3 acres that access Blake Boulevard. Austin, if you can flip to the next slide. So we've done a PowerPoint presentation, and Alex has pretty much shown this. This is just the site location on the aerial photography. You see Piner South to the north, CCNC, Olivia Lane, Highway 5. So existing conditions, again, we're south of Blake Boulevard, east of Highway 5, just north and abut Olivia Lane. The project's 14 acres, current zoning R5 again. So the site generally falls from west to the east, with the low spot being in the location where we have the stormwater pond. But other than that, the topography is fairly gentle from the north to the south. Current uses are wooded, and no structures have been on site, and we don't have any historical evidence that there have been any structures on the site. As Alex alluded to, we don't have any wetlands, no floodplains, no environmentally sensitive areas, other than we did address the RCW habitat, as we just discussed. This is just another picture of the zoning map. You've all seen this before, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but okay. So this is not, what you see now are the typical cottage style. So one of the things that the applicant is trying to do here is bring to the table in the village a housing opportunity that's not, I wouldn't say readily available. These cottages are going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,800 to 2,500, 2,400 square feet, depending on, how much they have bonus rooms above garages and things like that. So the cottage style almost resembles a little bit of a traditional neighborhood development, small lots, narrow, longer houses. And the intent is, again, that housing choice being there for addressing roughly 60, I think it was 22% of the village population by the comp plan. And some of these housing choices that don't exist, other folks are leaving town and going to other places to pursue. So we feel like this will be a great addition to the village. Again, the maintenance of all the common space is obviously done under the POA, but also the maintenance of the yards, the individual yards will be done under the POA. So, when you ride through the neighborhood, the idea is that, with street trees, pedestrian friendly, the yards and grass is always mowed pretty consistently at the same time. Landscaping will be fairly similar. And again, a very walkable little neighborhood, and we think as the comp plan outlines for the Innovation Hub, as that begins to develop, this will be an added feature or an added plus to that Innovation Hub, because then that could make the whole, that whole area walkable. And then you've got Pinehurst South just to the north, which possesses a lot of redevelopment opportunity. Alex went through the plat. Again, the plat's it's at such a scale, it's a little bit hard to tell. I've got a couple blow-ups of this plat. Austin, if you'll hit, this is Austin Parent, who works for Marcel. He's technically assisting us today. Go back one, Austin, I'm sorry. So you've got the street access to the north on Blake Boulevard, and then the street access to the south, we'll call it access, we put in with a lot of discussion with village staff, TRC. We have been going back and forth very cooperatively for a few months, Alex, is that fair to say? But so a few different rounds of comments, and we have addressed, we feel like we've addressed all of those comments. So the stub out road you see to the west would be that, again, that future extension of Arnett Street, which, as Alex alluded to, is a DOT road. Obviously, there's a piece of right-of-way missing in there that's about, I don't know, probably 300 feet wide between Arnett and where we show it stubbing out. By doing so, we eliminated the cul-de-sac and again, created the 38th dwelling unit lot. We've still provided access to Olivia Lane, and there are some things yet to be worked out, I think, on Olivia Lane, but if you think about where fire station number 2 is in the village and their ability to come from fire station number 2 through our new road and hit a siren activated gate on Olivia Lane, and then have even an easier access, we think, into the backside of CCNC for emergency purposes, as well as other village purposes that they use it for. But in the event that the railroad was staging a train on the tracks, there's a much more direct, a little less circuitous, and quite frankly, a better road access that'll get you to that back gate of CCNC. So we feel like that is an added bonus. I know there are questions about Olivia Lane ownership and then the lease agreement with the railroad, and the applicant, through some discussion with village staff, has agreed that if we cannot define that access as a true secondary means of emergency access, that we are willing to sprinkle the houses with basically a residential rated fire suppression system, which, and as it relates to, fire flow in the area, we've had previous fire flow tests. We feel like the fire flow or the ability to fight fires in the areas will be more than satisfactory. The county has a fairly robust system, and the flows were good from what we originally observed. So, but at any rate, we feel like we have addressed the emergency access concerns and fire suppression and fire access, and we think that would be beneficial to everybody, including CCNC and the village. Again, the pump station, the Moore County Sanitary Sewer Pump Station is lot, I think it's lot 41, but it's the one at the end of the cul-de-sac to the furthest to the south there. It's a larger lot. Basically, we will collect all the gravity sewer from the site, pump it back out to Blake Boulevard, and then again, public water into the site via Moore County Public Utilities. Austin, one more, if you go hit one more slide, maybe keep going. This is another thing that we'll bring up here. So the thing that Alex mentioned was this drainage easement you see there with the yellow star. So we originally had a drainage easement that would collect off-site drainage or have a route for off-site drainage from the 28-acre neighborhood commercial tract. Again, through discussion with staff and TRC, we have made that available for pedestrian access. So in the event that the Innovation Hub or that property develops in accordance with Village, the comp plan, there would be, a great opportunity to make that neighborhood even more walkable because you could put a greenway path or a sidewalk through that drainage easement. And we've reserved the right for that to be drainage and pedestrian access. Go ahead. So flip forward to a slide or two. You see right there. So there's our typical street section. Again, sidewalk on both sides of the road, street trees. It's a 24-foot pavement width with a 2-foot valley gutter. So you're actually at 28 feet back to back. And I have a hard time seeing that myself, so I'm sure you all do. The reason we're asking for the waiver on the valley gutter, we realize that the council will grant that, but typically in these houses, when these houses are on smaller lot configurations, if you have the standard vertical curb, you end up with a lot of curb cuts on a street that are basically unnecessary. This valley gutter is more like a mountable curb where your driveway transitions are a little bit smoother and they don't take up so much of the lot, and it doesn't look like you have this cutout of a driveway and then all of a sudden you go back to the standard vertical curb. So that is the reason why we're asking for that waiver. You'll see, stay on that slide for 1 second. So you can see here the stormwater management area. We feel that is sufficient to treat or to hold our 10-year design storm. The area to the east, everything sort of slopes from the west to the east in a kind of a north-southeast direction. So we will hold that water at the 10-year design rate. So pre-development rate will not exceed the post-development runoff rate will not exceed the pre-development runoff rate. I'm going to ask you to go back one more slide to that site data table. One more, please. Let's see. There you go. So when we start talking about impervious, this district allows a max of 45%. Currently, we're at about 35.8 on this preliminary plat. That we realize that might change up or down just a little, but we don't expect it to change a whole lot. We've accounted for 3,500 square feet of impervious surface just on the lot. We really did that as an exercise so we can make sure that, a patio or a paver yard back in the backyard that might get incorporated into these lots. Okay, you can keep going forward there, Austin. So again, proposed site data, Alex talked about well, let me talk about the buildings. Again, they're 1,700 square feet, and that actually should be 2,400 square foot houses. We're about a 40 by 65 building pad and about 10 feet of separation between, actually I take that back, about 20 feet of separation between the buildings. Most all of the units will be mastered down, with the majority of them being with the living space being on one single area with potential bedrooms upstairs and bonus rooms and things. Again, buffer requirements not required to have a buffer in this particular case, but as the neighborhood commercial develops, that will be buffered. We are requesting full movement onto Blake Boulevard. Again, the gated access at Olivia. And again, that's subject to some interpretation of the lease agreement with the railroad between applicant and village attorney and the railroad to make sure that we don't jeopardize the current agreement that you have with the village. And again, as a method to mitigate any jeopardizing of that agreement, the applicant has agreed to sprinkle the houses, should that not be worked out as a secondary access. Again, internal circulation, they're intended to be public roads and sidewalks. We will design and construct to the village engineering standards manual, as well as all the other site components. I talked about stormwater management and utilities, parking. So we assume there's 38 units. We have 76 parking spaces, if you will, but those are all contained on the lot. There's no off-street there's no off-street dedicated parking or on-street parking. So they're intended to be on the lots. You could probably actually put more than that because you could have at least one in the garage and two on the driveway. Okay, Austin. Again, I feel like I'm repeating way too much, but these are just some of the development site data. Again, the 2-foot curb and gutter and the voluntary annexation into the village once complete. Traffic impact, so we had a traffic analysis or a trip gen analysis done by Ramey Kemp. These numbers are slightly updated from some phone conversations we had with the traffic designer. Originally it talked about 37 lots, now we had the one extra lot. So that generates a total of 432 daily trips, with the AM peak hour at 33 and then the PM peak hour at 41. So that's 9 entering, 24 leaving, 26 entering, and 15 exiting. So that, the single-family residential is one of the lower traffic generators. We did an exercise when we were looking at the neighborhood commercial piece some time ago, and it was somewhere on the order of magnitude of about 10 to 15 times what single family generates. So we don't expect there to be any negative impact to the roadway network. And of course, that number of trips is significantly lower than what would be required for a traffic impact analysis. So Austin, if you'll flip forward a couple of slides in there, I'll tell you when to stop. I'm sorry, if you keep going forward. Yeah. So go back one there. So this is where we had talked about this, this housing opportunity. Infill areas, this is pretty much as close as we can consider to be infill, albeit not in the village core, but these were excerpts from your draft comp plan where it talked about this age group of 22.5% of your population between 65 and 74 that are looking for, in some cases, an opportunity to move out of a larger house, move into something a little bit smaller that's less maintenance headache. Again, these are full exterior maintenance, smaller footprints they give, and they're also very conducive for the young professional who maybe a little bit more mobile, likes to travel on the weekends, don't want to stay home and mow grass all the time like I do. But so I think this could have a diversity of uses or buyers, but we feel like we do try to address to the extent that we can the language in the comp plan where it talks about diversification of housing opportunities, particularly for that population sector. So, Austin, you can flip back. Come on back down. Keep going forward, Austin. So right there, some of you have seen this slide before from when we were here before. So this is kind of our take on a little bit of the mixed use you have going on in the Pinehurst South area. Again, I know that area is kind of slated for some small area plans, and in addition to the remaining 28 acres on what we call the Mahaley tract. But we have churches, barbershops, gas stations, now the business that was for sales, now the ABC store, we have banks, we have furniture stores, we have tax and property management, professional services. So there are a lot of opportunities that currently exist there that could be utilized by this neighborhood and the homeowners of this neighborhood. And then in addition to that, as the neighborhood commercial piece develops and with the Innovation Hub, we feel like that will be, further impetus for that redevelopment in the Pinehurst South area. So again, we feel like we've hit the marks in some ways in the sense of providing some opportunity for housing, and also, in trying to stay consistent with the existing zoning, so. If you go back to that question slide, so you can go on back to the question slide, Austin. So that's, for the most part, my part of the presentation. Marcel, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just open the floor up however you want to do for questions or whatever.
Questions?
Yes, sir.
The drawings that we received in our packet show a revision block that says revised per village comments, and it's dated 10/19/2020. Were the comments that were generated and agreed to at the TRC meeting at the 15th of October incorporated in these revisions?
Yes, sir. All of the comments that we've had with TRC, from TRC and staff, comments that have been provided have been included in that, into that plat.
I thought site triangles were going to be created at the intersections of streets B and C with Street A, as well as where the stub out would go to the west.
Well,
But
so the,
Site
so the,
triangles are not shown on the drawing.
well, so the guidance we got from the village engineer that site triangles would be shown where they tie into a major arterial street, which is Blake Boulevard. We can add site triangles to it because we have the ability to do it, but we were just following the PDO and the engineering standards manual on that.
When will the commercial lot be developed?
Austin, can you go back to the slide? You can go back to the slide that's got the plat on it, if you don't mind. Yeah, that's good. There you go, right there. So we don't have, there's, and I won't, you have no intention of that being a commercial lot, because I don't think it's a conforming lot at this point. So that lot is, at this time, is slated for entry, landscaping, leaving as natural as we can to provide a nice aesthetic for coming into the neighborhood. Plus it gives some buffer, off of Blake Boulevard. So there'll probably be some entry monumentation in that area, but there's no plans for that to be developed.
Subdivision monument sign that location?
Possibly, but it would be, I assume you want a monument sign. Sure. Yeah, possibly, but,
Community?
yeah.
A lot of driveways that are going to be constructed here. Has there been any thought given to common driveways?
No, not at this point, Mr. Chairman. At this point, which is one of the reasons we have asked for the valley gutter, so that we don't have driveway cuts right beside driveway cuts, because the valley gutter pretty much provides that driveway transition. So we have not considered at this point common driveways or shared driveways. And
It would make sense to me, for a safety point of view, number one, if those driveways could be combined, it might require a waiver from the sideline setback in a PDO now for driveways. I think they have to be 5 feet or something, but
right.
I think that's a worthwhile consideration, and maybe a waiver would be in order.
If it's okay with you, I'll discuss that with the applicant. We've not considered that at this point, and then if we decide that's a direction he wants to go, we can certainly revise some of the development conditions and take it before council that way.
What happens when there's a big party? Where do people park?
Potentially in their neighbor's driveway, should they get permission. There's not on-street parking, and again, we don't have, it's hard to find a spot for, what we'd call a parking lot. So at this point, I think you'd have to cover that in the covenants, and how many cars can be there and how that would work.
Has there been any discussion with the post office as to where the mail kiosk is going to be?
The intention here on mail is to either have it on have it delivered in mailboxes or post office boxes. Right now, we do not have a mail kiosk location shown on the plan.
When you say mailboxes, what do you mean? The regular
Freestanding,
gang
yes.
mailbox?
No, well, they may be individual, but, you know, when we talked to the post office, and I apologize, I don't exactly recollect the discussion, but we did have some correspondence with them, was that they could serve the site, or, you know, with the proximity from there to the post office, they could also do, you know, the option for PO boxes.
Is there a defined drainage way existing already where the 30-foot easements are on both sides of Street A, coming from the Mahaley property and
Yeah.
exiting out to the Rogers property?
Yeah, if we can go back to the plat on the screen there. That's probably, so there's a little bit of a defined swell through there. There may be, as we grade some of these lots, we may have to pick up some of that drainage, and make sure we divert it to that drainage easement, such to, you know, for the pre-development drainage. But, you know, the site generally falls in that direction from the northwest to the southeast. And of course, right now, it's pervious drainage, so everything on the lots will drain to the street.
I would really like you to do something about eliminating the number of lots that are not building lots that would have to be maintained by the HOA. For example, the pump station lot, lot 38. Why couldn't that southerly line come down and adjoin the northerly line on lot 37 and remove that, that little no man's land between lot 38 and lot 37?
Well, one of the reasons is we were trying to potentially provide some type of access for the, I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry, I can't see. So the existing building lot there, just south of the pump station lot, relative to the discussion, if the railroad access on Olivia were ever to be closed, then those two dwelling units, existing dwelling units, could have access by driveway to the internal streets of this neighborhood. So if we push the pump station lot down to tie that in, then, you know, we kind of block them out.
The Bethea and Locklear lot already has frontage on Olivia that they use for access, right?
Yes, sir?
Why would you think they'd have to have another driveway? Because of the railroad situation.
Yes, sir?
Anybody have any information on that?
The village and I believe the applicant too have both been in some conversations, both together through their legal representatives as well with the railroad. And the railroad's intent in the future, probably they would like for it to happen sooner than most likely most of us are ready for, is for one of the crossings, either at Arnett or Olivia, to go away. So if the Olivia crossing was the one to go away, then this area that Mr. Carpenter is referencing could allow for access to these other existing single-family residents to use that internal network. And then potentially, if the Arnett Street right-of-way could be extended into this proposal, then there would be access and a crossing there at Arnett to NC5, which would also better align with the Dawkins Street on the other side of NC Highway 5. So Mr. Carpenter's point was this has come of some conversation with staff, and we had kind of recommended keeping that open just in case the Olivia Lane crossing was to go away. These folks would still have access. The railroad has indicated, and you know, they would be amenable to revising the lease that we currently have to make sure that the folks there at the rear CCNC still have an opportunity for Village Emergency Services to access there. Again, but they would still want it clearly stated and known that their intent is to close one of those two crossings in the near future. When that may be, we're not sure.
What about Lot 34? Why couldn't that be extended all the way up to the right-of-way of Street C?
Well, I mean, you have a similar situation there, I mean, or a potentially similar situation where the Ingrams could actually come out and exit onto, via a driveway onto that cul-de-sac. Now, granted, they could also come out on Street C, straight out of the back of their house, but,
Ingram could go also north or west.
they could, yeah.
And if you put the Street C and Street A right-of-way up against the Ingram northerly lot line and the westerly lot line, that provides a connection point and eliminates what I call no man's land.
Yeah, I mean, it's common space that'll be maintained by the POA, not, we're not asking for the Village of Pinehurst to maintain that, so it is common space, would be maintained by the POA. So,
Is it normal that the HOA or POA documents are reviewed by the village before anything's approved?
I think it's normal before final plat, is that?
Yes, usually at the time construction's wrapping up and review and inspections, especially if there's a condition of approval that is needed, like make sure if they were to be private, that there's going to be an HOA that's going to maintain the private streets. In other areas, there's been, when the property owner association is going to maintain a lift station themselves, and we'll need to make sure that that's going to be insured for the residents that are going to be there in that development. It's good, it's definitely good practice, even if there's not a requirement of condition of approval.
I have a question, please.
Yes.
If we have that opening on Olivia, do you think people will park there to go to the parties in the neighborhood? And then that becomes a problem?
I apologize. Would you mind repeating that? I apologize.
My concern was on Olivia Lane, do you think people will park there since there's no parking in the neighborhood? I mean, neighbors, or especially older people, are not going to want their cars blocked in the garage. If there is parking on Olivia Lane, I mean, which they could, and then just walk into the houses, is that going to be a problem for the vehicles to get in?
Well, they will not be able to park on Olivia Lane because that would be a gated access under any pattern of development, and that gated access is only activated by emergency vehicle siren. So Olivia Lane is really not, at this point, considered an access to any of these residents.
Right, but if we get the access open, then it could be a potential problem, correct?
Well, it's not our intention. Our intention is that would stay an emergency gated access, accessible only by fire, and garbage, may also use that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So will it be gated just for vehicles? Like, will the whole perimeter be fenced in, or will it be a lever kind of gate? Will people be able to park on Olivia and then walk into the neighborhood?
Yeah, so we haven't addressed the specifics of the gated access, only that we would comply with the fire code officials' requirements for siren-activated gated access. So it could be, if you've ever seen the one at the end of Olivia, that one's actually in a chain link fence that slides open, siren-activated. We've seen others that are post-mounted on either side with an activated arm that comes up or down.
That one works because CCNC as a whole has a whole fence around the perimeter.
Correct, right.
This property likely.
This property would not, right.
This is annexed by the village. Are you going to be able to have a gate there on
I'm
a
sorry.
village? If these roads are annexed by the village and they become village property, will you have a gate here?
There will be a siren-activated gate there for emergency vehicles only. You're talking about, we're talking about on Olivia Lane, not on Blake Boulevard.
Yeah, Olivia Lane, correct.
So Olivia Lane, the issue with Olivia Lane is an ownership issue of
Okay.
who owns it, so that's why it's that way.
Just a point of clarification, Olivia Lane is designated as a private street. It's also designated no parking along Olivia Lane as well.
And you are in agreement to provide a detailed traffic engineering analysis of the intersection of Blake Boulevard and Street A
Yes, sir.
with the construction drawing application.
Correct.
Thank you.
So just for clarity, are they one or two-car garages?
I mean, I guess they're two-car,
Uh-huh.
but I guess it also depends on what somebody's driving and how good. My house is technically a two-car garage, but the way my wife parks, I absolutely cannot get my vehicle in there, so, but technically it is a two-car garage.
I don't want to continue to beat up Olivia Lane, but maybe it's just for my own education. So the village is responsible for acquiring, whether it be Arnett or Olivia Lane, this continued access. I think the term lease is here. So you would do the lease, and it would be defined by a number of years prior to the construction plans being approved.
So the current lease agreement is that it affords us the opportunity, us, the village, to access that crossing for the sole purpose of providing emergency access to the rear lots at CCNC. If that we were to use that crossing for anything else, as the current lease agreement states, then it would have to be renegotiated. So the whole if, the status of Olivia Lane can be sussed out one way or the other, and that if a connection can be made to Olivia Lane, allowing for yet another access there by the village, then at that moment, a new agreement would have to be renegotiated.
Okay,
So
so,
up until if or when the applicant, which I understand they have been spending ample time doing title and deed research, trying to find out, as the village has in previous years as well, these such statuses. If they can provide something that's acceptable to the village that allows us to move forward, and then the village and Aberdeen Carolina Western Railroad Company have to come to another agreement, and everything still lines up. We're able to provide services to CCNC, we have a secondary form of access, then we're good to go.
okay, so it's a nice to have for the applicant, but not a mandatory. The way, because they have the ability to put sprinklers in, it's just a nice to have, it's not a must have.
So if I can.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll go back and sort of go back to that development condition for a moment. So as Alex mentioned, the village, as well as the applicant, myself, and the applicant's attorney have been doing an ample amount of research with the railroad. We've had a conference call with the railroad. So the way the agreement reads, and I won't pretend to play attorney, and I'll let Dave stop me if I need to, but the way we have interpreted that, and I think the way the village attorney interprets it, as well as village staff, that agreement was written specifically for that 100-foot crossing coming off of Highway 5 where they cross the railroad track. And for the sole use of fire and emergency access and garbage, I think. Didn't include
I don't think we
garbage.
put
Okay,
that
maybe it
garbage.
was just fire and emergency access for getting into CCNC. And it referenced CCNC very specifically. And so if that was used for any other purposes, it gave the railroad the opportunity to renegotiate that agreement. Well, we obviously don't want to jeopardize the village's agreement with that. So in our conversations with the railroad, the intent would still that it would be for fire and emergency access vehicles, but those same vehicles could come into our neighborhood. Now, assuming that that is not approved or amenable to the railroad or anyone else, and not to jeopardize the railroad agreement that the village currently has, the applicant has agreed to, if we can't get a full secondary access, we will sprinkle the homes.
And I think that the village's concern, and it's on that condition, is regarding, we need to be assured that legally we can actually connect to Olivia Lane at that point. So that was one of the points in that condition. The railroad is okay with renegotiating the agreement. I've talked with the railroad. Long-term, they would like to see the properties that are accessing Olivia find a way not to have to use Olivia. So they've stated that to us. But they're okay with an emergency access. If for some reason you'd get a full access to this at some point, I think so this unnamed street goes through and connects at a full access to Olivia Lane. I think a full public access, I think that would cause the railroad a lot of concern, because then it would open up that circulation system, and then they'd have potentially more vehicles crossing over that private crossing that we have the lease for.
And of course, we have no idea of time frame type of thing. It certainly won't happen before you present to council, I wouldn't imagine. Or do you have an idea of?
As far as the negotiation with the railroad?
Correct, yeah.
I don't know if we will have that completely ironed out by the time we meet with council. I would say likely not.
Just likelihoods.
Yeah, please. Members of the planning board, Dave Neal with Fox Rothschild in Raleigh, 434 Fayetteville Street, Suite 2800. The trigger is going to be submission of construction drawings. So that would be the time where the developer would have to know, have we worked everything out, or am I submitting for a sprinklered system? That'll be the situation. The layout that Tim has done in terms of the ground allows the village to know that if something happens subsequent to that, we've laid out the areas to allow for future connections, for example, for our net. Even if the cottages have been fully built out, something might happen in the future. We've made the planning preparations already to allow for a connection via our net or Olivia. If there are any questions about the real estate or the crossing, I'm happy to answer those.
Do the two individuals that live on Olivia Lane have permission to use Olivia Lane to get in and out of their homes? Is that their main?
To the best of my knowledge, none of the homes that front on Olivia Lane have formal agreements with the railroad. However, the Olivia Lane has been there at that location from at least 1950, where we can see it on an aerial.
So that's the main point of ingress and egress for those two homes, is Olivia Lane?
That is their sole method of ingress and egress for all the homes on Olivia. That's right.
Yeah? Thank you. It just seems to me that we're trying to make a situation that doesn't, to me, potentially exist. I mean, if I lived here, and I'm very, very familiar with this, because I used to live somewhat across the street, but I wouldn't want to go out Olivia Lane and then come on to Route 5, no matter where I lived in this development. I'd want to come out to Blake Boulevard, go to the traffic light. If I'm going the other way, go down to Monticello and take my right turn, or even go down to Monticello, take a left turn, and get to the other traffic light. I don't see the need to provide, from a personal standpoint, to provide any access for this development onto Olivia Lane, except for an emergency. And I'm not saying you do,
Right.
but I mean, from our standpoint, it's just, I can't imagine if I lived there, I can't imagine if I lived in Lot 41, that I would want to come out and take a right turn and wait for that traffic on Route 5. I mean, I'll be there till,
Yes, sir.
breakfast.
Mr. Schreiber, I agree with you. And as you mentioned, we do not propose to have any normal daily traffic coming through.
Right,
That is
I understand.
slated as emergency access only. So I would agree that it's an easier path to go out to Blake, hit a traffic signal, and then you get to find your way at that point, whether you're going left or right. But yeah, I agree, and our plans are represents as such.
My only other comment, Marcelo, is that this looks like a detached housing from what Windjam has behind Lawn and Tennis. which is a very attractive development. He can't build them fast enough. I mean, Windjam's not building them anymore, but as you know, he can't build these things fast enough to sell them. The streets are about the way this is. The parking is about the same. They're 2 and 3 unit attached homes. I just had a friend sold $1 million home to live over there because of a retirement for the same reason I assume you're living this. So I mean, from a personal standpoint, I told you this when you first came, I just think this is a great concept. The one question I've had, which is absolutely none of my business and has no bearing on this, it's more I'm curious. What price point are you looking at for these things?
Probably be in the mid-300s. Probably be in the mid-300s.
Yeah, okay, that's about. So, I mean, they're very comparable to the project there, and again, so, thank you.
And if I could just state one thing to make sure it's clear for everyone here too. We keep talking about a second form of access and sprinkling the units. The reason for that is Appendix D of the North Carolina State Fire Code requires that if it's a residential units of 30 or more, a second form of access is required or other homes must be sprinkled. That's the sole reason why we're even discussing either one of those two, and then there again, the complicated factor of how it relates to Olivia Lane. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
It's just a point, when I was building some of this stuff, the idea of building with sprinkler systems was really attractive to people wanting to buy these things. I mean, we were in the $700,000 range, but they just loved the idea of the security at an older age of having a fire system. And we found the cost was not that great to do it. And I can't ever remember our first home over there at 7 was sprinkled. I can't remember anybody who ever came in the home who noticed it was sprinkled. I mean, people just don't look up at the ceiling and go, well, I mean, nowadays it's just they're hidden and they're great. And even if you weren't required, I think it's a fabulous idea. So I'm done.
So if that access on Olivia for emergency services is blocked off, what happens to those two houses? I guess they're not in the jurisdiction, but does CCNC then get access from within this subdivision?
No, again, that should just, again, be sold for just for fire services or emergency services.
But I guess if it were blocked off, would fire services have to then come through the subdivision?
Correct. And the fire marshal has agreed that would, if that all works out, that could potentially, very potentially be a much more desired path for our emergency services to go.
And can these homeowners access your streets once the subdivision is built, or would those little access points not be available unless they were needed?
Yeah, so, good question. So at this point, obviously, they have access out on Highway 5. And at current time, it's the way we currently have it drawn, no, they would not access those streets because that would be an emergency connection only. In the event that we get us and the village get a little further down the road with the railroad, and the railroad decides they're going to block that connection, then at that point, you know, as we discussed before about lots 37 and 34, the applicant has agreed that, and I think what we had talked about doing was maybe bringing that into the covenants in one way or another, that they could get an access driveway onto that cul-de-sac, let's see, Street C. So that would give them an access into the street without having to come out onto Olivia and run through the fire gate. So it would be more of a driveway at that point. I mean,
But that's only if they need it.
correct.
Okay, that's nice.
Sounds like a good idea, though.
Thank you.
Do you know if those two lots have deeded rights of access to utilize Olivia, or is it just prescriptive?
I'm going to make a real quick statement. There you go. Thank you, Dave.
To this point, we are unaware that anyone, including our parcel, has an express deeded right of access onto Olivia Lane. I certainly love talking about real estate issues, and you talked about prescriptive rights. There's also a variety of other implied easement matters that may come up. Marcel has retained Jim McNeil as his real estate counsel on this directly, who is looking at not just our parcel, but all of those parcels that were formerly part of one large tract called the Arnett Tract, coincidentally enough, and how they came to be subdivided and how all those owners came to believe that they had rights onto Olivia Lane, including our tract. But that has not been proven by the deed record as yet.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I was looking at the comprehensive plan, and you have hit the mark on a lot of things that they were looking for. I also looked, this is like approximately 14 and a half acres, and Pinehurst South, or the Highway 5 commercial area, is 290 acres. So this is like 5% or less of the total area. And did the village or the council have an opportunity to stop development in this area until they could develop a plan, or is it,
Being that given that it's currently zoned residential, the only opportunity they would have had to change the development pattern would have been to do a proactive zone change into this area. Because it's residential, we don't believe the moratoria statute allows us to do a moratorium for residential uses. If it's commercial use, yeah, we can do it for commercial uses, and the village has employed that when they're doing the new core master plan. But when it's involving a residential use for something that's already zoned for the appropriate land use, it would have been, we could not have done, or at least our opinion is, you could not have done a moratorium for something like that. So it would have had to have been a proactive zone change.
well, I think that LKC has done a great job of it, taking the property that's at the far east end of this commercial area and creating something that meets a need in this area and still leaves plenty of space for the commercial area development that we could do. And so I commend you. You did a good job.
Appreciate it.
There's no other names on the sign-up sheet, but I know at least one person came in, maybe two people came in after the meeting started. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make some comments? Okay, thank you. Do we want to close the public hearing now and have discussion? Or do we're obliged to, we don't have to take action or make a decision tonight because we wait for this 24-hour period. But when would be the next available time where we could all get together to sit down and discuss and take action on the application?
So just for a point of clarification for you, if the board feels that they have taken sufficient enough information on this proposal, you can go ahead and close the public hearing. That is a requirement that you have to do. You have to hold the public hearing. You can go ahead and close it, and then after closing of the public hearing, then you can discuss and deliberate when to reconvene, at least a minimum of 24 hours, so then the board can take action. So if you think there's been enough discussion and items disclosing the public hearing, then you can close it.
Do you have a preference do you have a problem if we were to wait until the December 3rd meeting? Would you prefer we do this sooner than later?
Well, I see Mr. Neal standing up back there again. I'll let him.
So in addition to my service to Marcel today, I'm also the town attorney for the town of Rollsville. A number of communities, given the emergency statute, have found a middle ground that I would throw out that might be appropriate and might be helpful in this case. The board could close the public hearing, have its deliberations, have its vote, but that vote be conditioned upon a lack of receipt of additional comment over the next 24 hours. If you were to receive additional comment, you would need to reconvene and have a new vote considering whatever additional information you received. But given as that's perhaps unlikely in this case, that has been the middle ground that many towns have been using during this time. And I just throw that as a middle ground option.
I have a comment,
Go ahead,
please.
Sonia.
I think that we need to wait on making a decision. I agree with Joel until we find out more about this railroad crossing, et cetera. I don't think we need to rush into this and make some conditional consent today. And then if somebody objects, et cetera, I think we need to stick with how we've been doing things.
Does that mean the 24-hour period? Oh, I'm sorry.
I think we need to wait till the December meeting so that we can get all this with the railroad. Hopefully, since they say they're so close to any of the answers, I think we need to wait, like Joel said, till the December meeting.
I'm not sure that we're going to have a decision by the December meeting from the railroad. And relative to that point, we have provided or agreed to the development condition that in some ways is, the railroad is a non-issue. Is that a safe statement, Dave?
I don't feel comfortable making that conditional vote today.
Yes, sir.
With regard to the railroad question, the condition resolves the issue as to whatever the railroad or the title might provide. Staff will have objective guidance, and our engineer will know what they have to construct, whether they need a sprinkler or not. And if the condition is acceptable to the board, they certainly could take action. If the question is relating to providing time for additional comment from the public, certainly that's a reasonable consideration. But it should not be an issue with regard to the railroad or the title.
So if I can, just to repeat myself, if we put sprinklers in, the crossing at Olivia is irrelevant. Is that correct?
Emergency access, correct.
Thank you.
I think we're covered, Sonia, with the conditions that will be attached to this, that the
I
planners
still
have
don't think we should
recommended.
make a decision today.
And
When would everybody be available? On Thursday, the 12th.
Should we make a motion to close the public hearing and deliberate among the board? So I make a motion.
I want to find out when people are going to be available first.
I can be
you can still
available on
close
the,
the hearing. The
Pardon
hearing,
me?
you can still close the hearing because the
Oh, yeah.
required hearing has been held. You don't
Okay.
have to do that inside the hearing. Everyone's still
There's
here.
no other questions from any board members or anyone in the audience. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
Do I have a motion by Cindy, a second by?
Second.
So moved. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Done. Public hearing is closed. Discussion.
I'll make myself available next week if needed.
I can be available remotely. I'll be traveling until the 21st of November, but I can come up on Zoom.
I'd like us to consider taking the vote tonight, and with the understanding that if there is any additional information, that we then meet again, if that's a possibility.
All right, let's have a show of hands. Who wants to make a decision tonight? Looks like we're going to do that.
And to clarify, that would be conditional on any further public input provided to the clerk within a minimum of 24
With that
hours.
condition. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, is there any staff input on that?
Well, the village is not as experienced as other jurisdictions that Mr. Neal's worked in. Technically, this is not necessarily again, a map or text amendment where it explicitly says in the statute that you must allow for a public comment period of 24 hours or not. This does act in that manner, so it is prudent to, and it probably would be, in most cases, favorable to basically delay action until you do have that 24 public comment period time. However, I do think case-by-case basis, depending on the nature of the proposal, the nature of the folks who decided to show up. This is the second time we have convened and a notice meeting has taken place. I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say staff would oppose a conditional vote this evening, contingent on additional public comment. But the guidance that we have received from the School of Government, again, this is all very new to a lot of us, especially here, is that it would probably be more prudent to wait and delay action for a minimum of 24 hours. But again, considering the nature of the case, the board may decide that it's fine to move forward with a conditional vote.
Any risk that we are opening ourselves up to by doing that that you can think of?
The public hearing requirement that we're having is a local requirement under our own PDO. It's not, like Alex said, it's not a legislative action like a zone change or a text amendment where there is a required statutory requirement for holding the public hearing. So is there potentially a risk? Yeah, I think it's a minor risk given what Alex had stated. This is essentially, what we're doing is essentially an administrative review. You're looking at the standards of review in that PDO. Same thing we've talked to council before when we're going through Floyd Way. If it meets the standards of review, you essentially have to approve it. So I think we're comfortable with the conditional
But we
language.
do have to I won't say reconvene, meet again to make the confirmation that there were no further comments in the 24-hour period, blah, 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 whatever.
No, I
We
think
have
that
to meet as a body.
if the conditions, if we do get comments, if we receive comments, that's the trigger. So if we receive some public comments regarding the application, then you would reconvene.
And
So
then
we
the-
need to have a date, one way or the other, when we can all reconvene,
If
basically.
there's no comments, then no.
No, but we'd have to set it up tonight so that if there are comments in 24 hours, we would all have agreed.
So
Who would like to put forth a motion?
And remember, you always have the December meeting. If worse things happen, I mean, we could always call a special meeting. So if comments came in, we could call a special meeting, or we do have the December meeting. I think we're comfortable. This has not been a controversial application. I think it's safe to, and we've got no inquiries that I'm aware of. I'm pretty sure that we're not going to get any comments, but that's speculation.
I'm comfortable putting forward a motion, but can we discuss a date in case we need one?
Well, let's hypothetically, if there's a motion for a conditional vote based on no public comment provided within the minimum 24-hour window, so we're talking roughly 6 p.m. tomorrow. If something were to come in that meantime, then we would still have notice requirements that we would have to meet of a public body, which would be a minimum 48-hour notice that we would have to provide. So I think we would have ample time. That's not going to happen within 2 days, just because of getting everyone together and getting all these resources together. So at the best, it would be a 12th at 4:30, sometime on Friday the 13th, or the December, regular scheduled December meeting. So I don't think if that's the decision the board wants to go, I don't think we have to nail down a Plan B date at this point. That's something we could work out within the next week.
Just trying to keep our leader here involved if I can
And
before
it
the
could change.
17th.
I
Okay,
know.
if you didn't
We
know
all
where it was
have
going.
tentative schedules, I understand.
Okay.
Have a motion coming. Clearly into the microphone, sir.
Yes. I would like to make a motion that we review the application tonight, make a decision on it tonight, and if comments come in within the 24-hour period, we discuss a date that we can reconvene and meet to review. Is that clear enough?
Is there a second?
Second that.
Second.
Was it? Motion by Jeremy, second by Paul. Do we want to restate the motion, just to be sure?
You have to clear me up, but I guess I can restate by saying, I would like to make a motion that we vote on the application tonight, and given any comments within the next 24 hours, we then reconvene at the
With the
earliest.
condition that if comments are received within the 24-hour period,
With the condition that if
we would
comments are
have to
received.
reconvene to discuss those comments and decide.
What you
So
said.
what the motion isn't really clearly stating is what you proposed the action by the Planning and Zoning Board be on this proposal.
I would propose that we make a vote tonight on the application.
I think we need to talk about it, and then our motion, if I'm understanding correctly, we make a motion either for or against it with the conditions that the planning board has recommended, plus the condition that if there's any comments that come in within 24 hours, we will revote, take a second vote based on those. Is that, am I hearing you
I'd
right?
like those things to be combined all into one motion.
Treat it
Okay,
as if
not as
this
two
is not a
different
remote
motions.
meeting, yeah. So
Okay.
if you look in your staff report, if the board would wish, or if a board member would wish to make a motion based on the staff's recommendation, make a motion, read the staff's recommendation, and then include an additional condition of, that this vote is contingent on no more public comments within a minimum of the 24-hour comment period.
Yeah, well, then, given that, if that's the consensus of everybody, then I'll retract my motion before we discuss the vote.
Accept that amendment, Paul.
I'm sorry. I was paying attention, but I didn't understand your question, sir.
Is that acceptable to you
Yes.
as your second?
Yes.
Okay. Let's have a voice vote. Mr. Roberts,
Okay, are we voting on the motion, or are we voting on approval of the applicants?
we're voting
There's
on
no
the conditional approval
Yeah,
on the application.
So for clarity, I've retracted my motion at this
Leo?
point in time. so.
Leo, are you doing a straw poll?
I'm sorry?
Are you doing a straw poll right now?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Does everybody understand what we're doing?
Jeremy's are you withdrawing your motion?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and withdraw that, because I think the consensus from the board at this point in time is to make it a comprehensive motion altogether.
Correct.
And if that's the decision of the board, then I will withdraw my motion so we could possibly discuss the application and then take a vote at another means.
I think the,
Take action
That makes
Oh,
sense?
Can I,
and condition the action.
Start over, yes.
okay. So can I make a motion that we approve the preliminary plat with the following conditions? All dwelling units shall be equipped with a fire sprinkler suppression system as approved by the Village of Pinehurst Fire Marshal unless the village's current lease agreement with the Aberdeen, Carolina, and Western Railway Company is renegotiated to permit emergency secondary access to the subdivision. Prior to approval of construction drawings, the applicant is to provide information acceptable to the village that an emergency access drive can be connected to Olivia Lane. And the second condition is a site distance analysis be performed and sealed by a qualified licensed North Carolina professional engineer with transportation engineering expertise for the proposed intersection with Blake Boulevard to confirm compliance with the AASHTO and North Carolina DOT requirements noted in the village's ESSM as part of and prior to approval of the construction drawing submittal for this project. And the third condition would be that there are no comments received in the next 24 hours. If there are any comments, then our vote, we will take a second vote, reconvene and take a second vote.
I'll second that. Sounds good, thank you.
We have the motion and a second. And we need a vote. Voice vote, Mr. Roberts.
Recommend approval.
Aye.
Aye.
Approve.
Recommend approval.
Recommend approval.
Additional approval.
Oh,
Oh,
All those in,
you got two other members.
We
Julia,
don't count.
Sonia,
Yes.
okay. Motion carried.
Hey,
Julia, sorry.
We'll say, hey, just-
yes.
Thank you all very much for your patience and everything you're doing in these tough times. I know it's challenging, but we very much appreciate the staff and all the work that they've helped us with. And again, thank you.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 2-minute, 5-minute recess. Be back at 6:40, please.
5:40, 5:40, Leo.
convened at 5:40 for an agenda item under general business is an update on future planning and zoning board items. That's going to take quick.
Hey, quick, you want to watch the Packer game tonight like me? No,
Well,
kidding.
yeah, we just got this.
No, I know, and it's,
Quickly.
and it's not, it's only, this is only going to be an overview.
If you want to say what you want to say, I think we should have some time to review this stuff and get back to you.
And you're not, and I'm not asking for any action. We
Okay.
just wanted to throw something at you to see what you thought. And that's really what we want to talk about tonight.
Julia has ants in her pants, we got to get this other thing done, so.
Okay. Oh, that's right, BOA. All right, so I'm going to skip over most of what I had planned. So let's go straight to section, and I'll do this real quick. So section 9.5, which is a tree preservation and landscape requirements. So basically what we're proposing tonight, or what we're proposing to do and what we've drafted, over the course of the last year, we've been working on, and you guys have been working on a tree preservation ordinance. We've looked at what many other communities have done, and we know that there's a major concern about clear-cutting properties. And in our review of the statutes and what other communities have done, the communities that have clear-cutting ordinances or prohibitions in clear-cutting, all the communities that we've seen that have ordinances have special legislation from the state. So Chapel Hill, Cary, they all have a local bill that allows them to have a clear-cutting prohibition in their ordinances. So given that, we went back and started to look at, well, how can we create an ordinance to incentivize tree preservation? So what we did is we started to look at, okay, what are ways that we can do it and be in compliance with the enabling statute for zoning? Well, zoning allows us to create buffers and have buffer yards and landscaping. So from our standpoint, we started to look at, all right, why don't we create buffer yards? Right now, we have buffer yards between adjacent uses and buffer yards on non-commercial properties, but we don't really have buffer yards on residential uses. We have a landscaping requirement that you have 4 to 8 trees on a residential lot. We don't have placement requirements right there, and we do have some foundation requirements. So what we did was, Alex and I and Kathy Lyles, we've been working on this for the course of a year, and the last 4 months it kind of popped. We thought, well, why don't we upscale the amount of trees that are required in yards? And then, so we go on a spacing basis. So on the front yard, I think we're saying, what, Alex, 1 to 20? You'd have to have one tree for every 20 feet of lineal frontage. 15, I'm sorry, 15 feet. On the side yards, it's 1 to 30 or 35, and then back in the rear, it's another 120, whatever's the scale. So with that, what happens is you end up doing a calculation for each of these yards, how many trees you're going to have in each of those yards. So it goes, and Alex and I were ready to give you some examples, but it's taken some of the stuff, some of the lots that we're seeing from 4 trees to 16 trees. So it's increasing the amount of trees that are required. So as part of the ordinance, what we're also saying is that we're going to give you a credit for trees that are already on that site. And it hopes that will incentivize people from going through tracks and clear cutting everything in those tracks and having to come back and plant all these trees. So what we're saying as part of the standards, that we will give you a credit for each tree that you have on site that you've saved. We'll give you a credit for not having to plant those other trees on the site. And that's the basic grid of the ordinance. We're increasing the amount of landscaping that's required, the buffers, and then we're going to require you, or we're going to allow you to have a credit. And that's in 2 portions of the ordinance. One is for single-family development, and I'll show you an example real quick. And one is for lot. So if you have a lot, say you have a 40-acre parcel of land, and you have no development application in, and you want to come and clear cut, what we're going to say is you're going to be required to have a permit, and what we're going to enforce is those buffer yards. So you come in with a large undeveloped piece of land and you want to do some clearing, we're going to enforce those buffer requirements, saying, we're going to look at the front, the side, and the rears and say, you have to have the requisite planting in those buffer areas. And we will give you credit for trees that are already on that site, but we're tying everything back to a buffer requirement, because that's what we have to tie it back to the enabling legislation that allows us to require buffers. The recent changes with the state, and the state now defines development, part of the development, and it's in our definition here. On page 1, we talk about development is the excavation, grading, filling, clearing, or alteration of land. So the state says that clearing is development. So when people start to develop, we can then trigger the buffer yard requirements. And I just want to show you just one illustration real quick of what I'm talking about. So if we look at the, Jason, can you bring up, there we go. So if you look at the La Ferre plat, Floyd Way plat, this is not working. Go over here. Sorry, people, I'm sorry. So you look at the Floyd Way plat, you see all these individual lots. Prior to if we pass the ordinance as proposed, what will happen is, you see where I put all the green yards, these green lines around all these lots, those all become yards that will have a planting requirement in those yards. So, and everything that would come in, you would have to have the requisite amount of plantings in each of these yard areas. If there's existing trees on the site, we'll give you a credit. That's what the ordinance would propose. Real quickly, I'm going quickly. I'm trying. Alex, do you want to go over one of these real quick, just so they kind of see how to rotate view. All right, Alex, we ran some numbers based on what our proposal is. Alex is going to go over the numbers real quick.
All right, so these buffer yards that Darren's been talking about is really the areas within the building setbacks per that applicable zoning district. So you look at the area within the front setbacks, the side setbacks, and the rear setbacks. So that's the area that we're looking for our quote-unquote buffer yards, which again, as Darren has stated, looks like the clear grant of power within the recent legislation allows for buffering to reduce visual glare, noise, and other impacts, and as well as for neighboring privacy. So here's an example of a single-family development that we received within the past 5 or 6 months. This area here, I wish we had gotten a colored image scanned here, so I apologize for that because I had these highlighted. So PDF is not cooperating. All right, so.
Go up to the table, yeah. The table should help.
Yeah, so the area in the front, so this is all the front setback area here. This dash line is a front setback. So the front yard would extend all the way to the side lot line across the front setback area to the right side lot line. So based on the linear dimension, although as I asked Leo to be kind to us, as we said, we currently have language in there that says linear feet. We understand this is not a line, this is a curve. So with that measurement at 1 per 15 feet, there would leave a requirement of 8 trees to be within this buffer yard area. So just going by this surveyor, actually placed 8-inch or greater diameter breast height trees on this site plan. So that actually shows that there would be 3 existing trees that would be left that wouldn't be impacted by the development of this proposal. So there would be 5 that would be left to be additional plants that would be required to be planted if they gave themselves credit for those 3 existing. On either side, there would be 2 trees required. On one side, as you'll see here, here's a cluster of 2 trees. On the right side, there's 1. So there would be a remaining requirement of 1 more tree to be planted on the side. And the rear, based on the 1 per 25 count, there would be 2 trees required, and as you see, there's 2 existing. So I wouldn't say we just arbitrarily grab the measurements of 15, 1 per 15, 1 per 35, 1 per 25, because there were very many different versions of a requirement and a number that we tried to arrive at. We thought for clear administration of, for an objective standard, that the linear feet of the setback area was an easy thing that any of our objective staff could take a look at and do. And based on the numbers that we require now and what we would like to see, this gave us probably the closest that we could start with. We're definitely open to, let's hear maybe different measurements. So here you'll see, again, that's a pretty significant number of trees. So
That's 14, yeah, that's 14 trees that are required, and I think right now with this zone, what is it, 4? Is it 4 or 6?
It'd be 4 trees would be all that required, and there's no requirement where for them to be placed. So out of the 14, over half, 8, would need to be placed within the front setback area. And this is to try to, provide for those street line trees that a lot of people talk about when some of the first impressions they get when coming to the village of Pinehurst. So that's one example. Another example, this is a little bit more of a, sort of more of a boxy lot here, as you can see, and you can see the tree survey. Again, here the street front. We do have language in there now that says basically if you're a corner lot, so if you have 2 street fronts, the lot, both lot lines that front a street would be a front yard, so that 1 per 15 linear feet would require. Cindy's getting a nod there from Darren. Thank you for that, Cindy. So with this particular lot, these dimensions, it came out that 7 trees would be required in the front, 3 in each of the side, and 4 in the rear. So you can see here the breakdown of what the tree survey showed was existing, and then so what would be left to be planted. So you're looking at 10 extra trees would be required to be planted with, again, half of them being within this street front area.
And you can see we're putting a priority based on, priority on that front street yard area, because our street line trees, tree line streets, it's getting late, help define the character of this community, and that buffer, that street buffer, it also buffers the noise of the road and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we put a priority on that front yard area.
So this last one here is, since the trees were not marked on this survey, this is a better visual aid to show you what buffer yards, where the side buffer yards are, where the front buffer yard is, where the rear buffer yard is. So where they clearly start and where they clearly stop. And we understand there's got to be some flexibility built in. We've tried to put some language in there if based on conflicts of placements with utilities, for example, that the village planner could allow for credit of trees that may not be located within that area, or for alternate spacing, or for even size. Right now, we say anything that's 8 inches or greater diameter breast height will give you get to get credit for to meeting that requirement. And also, not all these lots are going to have these nice right angles, and so we really are going to have to let this be some sort of living text when we really get into it and start administering it. So we understand that, but we wanted to give you something now and prove to you that this lingering agenda item, this update, is not just us kicking the can down the road. Darren's been making me work really hard after coming back from vacation 2 days earlier this week to get something out to you guys. And we do apologize for it not being to you sooner and having ample time to take a look at it.
And really, we are trying to just throw this out at you to how do you feel? How do you react to it? Is it too much? Are we going too far? Should we find a way to go further? So right now, we're just trying to get a reaction from you. And Joel talked about it. We've also put there's a violation in there. So there's a violation clause that if you take down trees in violation of the ordinance, I think what do we have, a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 plant back requirement in there. So.
Right, how do you want to handle this? Do you want the individual members to send you comments, or It'll be on the agenda of the next meeting.
I think we could reconvene again in a special meeting if you'd like to talk about it in more draft form, or we can just talk about this particular issue. I'm open to that. You can send us comments. I'd like to have the forum that we're having right now so we can talk amongst each other in a work session. I'd love to be able to do that. You can send me comments ahead of that, but I'd like to come back in a work session and talk about it if you like.
Yeah, and I think even maybe, I know we're going to get late in the evening. We do have a Board of Adjustment meeting scheduled to immediately follow this, so we do have other things to do. But we don't want to just throw this at you and then run and hide, and we'll get to it later, because we know what get to it later can sometimes mean. But definitely, if there is something out there in this hastily put in front of you forum, if there's something glaring that you guys want to discuss right now, maybe down the line, Leo, get input from each individual board member, if they have anything glaringly they want to go through now. I know Darren's forwarded me some emails that some of you guys have sent. You know, Philip brought up a good point. You know, there might need to be some flexibility in the size of the required plantings. You know, right now, 3 inches is just kind of seemed to be a standard. Minimum 3 inches diameter breast height, minimum 3 inches diameter breast height. I can personally state within developments over the past couple of years, there's been limited stock, and especially within in a surrounding state area to get that stock. Obviously, we need to probably speak with some arborists and some other landscape professionals and see, is there, do 2-inch or 2.5-inch caliper trees allow for just as good of continued growth and long-term preservation? So, I mean, that's great feedback. So maybe if there's just something that automatically is just jumping out at you while we're all here, we value your input, and you guys will ultimately be making a recommendation on any such proposal before Village Council. So we want you guys involved now and often before we get to a public hearing.
I think the other aspect of this ordinance is it also requires 50% of the trees to be planted have to be longleaf pines. And then there's options for other ones in it, but again, it goes heavy on the pines. And I think Sonia had mentioned, recommended or wanted to talk about whether we should include hemlock in the type of trees to be preserved. So that was just something that she wanted to discuss for the future, if we should consider it. So, you know, those type of things, we'd like to have that discussion with you. We don't have to adopt this tonight. We're not expecting to adopt it tonight or within the next month, but if we could have another couple of meetings here to talk about it in this type of forum, a workshop type forum, we would love that. So we could I would like to have an ordinance in place, some proposal in place, hopefully by January-ish.
Maybe
Okay,
we don't
thank
have
you.
a lot on the December meeting. If all of us look at this and then send you questions or concerns or
Yep.
agreements or whatever, then we could do it in the December meeting.
Correct. We could.
Or we could do a November 12th meeting, and then we would have a meeting in place in case we have comments for the last proposal. Would you like a work session where we just talk about this?
That would be my idea.
Because lots of times, at the end of these meetings, we run out of time, and
We
then
do, like we're right
we
now.
don't really get to discuss it. So I would be open to having a work session in 2 weeks.
And we would definitely, we understand that Leo's term is up the 17th of this month, so if we could give as much time, we know Leo's not going anywhere. We know we're still going to get, and we want Leo's continued feedback and input on this. This is something Leo has been spending a lot of time with staff for, since 2018, I do believe. We even had a subcommittee at one point, Joel, Cindy, if I'm forgetting anyone else that was involved with that. So I would definitely be supportive of a meeting potentially between now and then, whether it's, if everyone can make it, if only a handful can make it, however we need to handle it staff-wise, if it does meet the requirement of a public body, then we can do the notice. It looks like for the 12th, however, the only availability that we would have for this room would be probably 4:30 PM or later. The 13th, it is a Friday, but Kelly and I had been looking ahead of time for this public comment period, 24-hour minimum. for the previous public hearing to try to see when in the world could we ever get together again prior to the December meeting. So the 13th is open throughout the day. Again, for the 12th, it would have to be after 4:30 PM. We're, doing annual enrollment for employee benefits and the annual State of the Village meeting, which I'm sure you guys have been, you've got a date or time selected if you haven't already, if you State of the Village.
How many can make the 12th?
I'm sure I can. I just have to-
Virtually, I can make it,
12,
Paul?
at 4:30.
Paul can make a virtual.
virtually.
Sure. We're open to that.
Okay?
Yeah, we'd love it. So do your homework, read over those. I know we've already gotten some comments, but yeah, we really want to talk about this in a setting where we're just devoted to talking to this, on this
4:30.
subject.
Sonia, Julia, I'll start with you, Sonia, first, make sure that you guys, and what's your availability you would prefer to attend?
Julia, you all right?
Yep, fine with me, fine. I
Sonia?
can attend virtually, no problem.
I will look at the calendar, but I think I can do 4:30 Thursday, the 12th.
Thank you.
And Sonia, would you prefer virtual again as well, I understand?
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
Next regular meeting date is December 3rd. But before we go, I'd just like to say thank you for all your hard work, you guys and girls. It's been an honor to be associated with you for however long you've been here. I'm up against the two-term end. I'm happy to go, but sad to go too, because there's a lot of work to be done that you really need to dig in and get it done. But I'll miss you, and I thank you for all your support in the past, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Leo. We appreciate all your time and effort and your
Motion
expertise.
to adjourn.
We may even calling you.
Thank you.
We're gonna miss you, Leo. Can we still rely on you for engineering information in the future?
Yeah, but this time it'll cost you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, it always
Fine.
did.
I'm kind of in
Adjourn.
the dark, but do we have a new chairman appointed or?
The council does that.
Okay, that's what I was asking because I didn't know what the procedure was on that. Great. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 6:03. We're going to need some time for IT to set up to accommodate